It all began at his bachelor party. His so-called buddies were laughing crudely when one of them threw out a question as sharp as a dagger. "That girl's pregnant, man. Aren't you worried your fiancé's gonna find out and kick you out of the wedding hall?" He smirked, arrogance written all over his face. "As long as I keep it quiet, she'll never know. Not for the rest of her life." What he didn't realize was that I was standing right behind the door, hearing and seeing everything without missing a single word. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't confront him. I simply withdrew in silence like a ghost fading into the dark. But inside, my mind was made up. Fine, if he chose to betray me, then on the day he dreamed would be the happiest of his life, I'd give him and that shameless woman a gift they would never forget. And believe me, I'd make sure that wedding became a memory he'd never dare to mention again. There were exactly 15 days left until my wedding with Ethan Collins. That evening, he was throwing his bachelor party with his closest friends. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling quietly, blanketing the rooftops and trees in white. I called Mr. Carter, his longtime driver. "It's getting cold," I said softly. "Could you bring Ethan his coat and shoes for me, please?" Mr. Carter arrived quickly, but when he stood at the gate of the villa, he hesitated for a moment before suggesting, "Miss Emma, it's still early. Why don't you bring it to him yourself? I'm sure if Mr. Ethan sees you come in person, he'll be very touched." I nodded quietly, put on my coat, and left with him. The party that night was full of familiar faces, from business partners from his early days to college classmates. Everyone there had known us for years. At first, I only planned to drop off the coat, remind him to take care of himself, and then head home. But as I reached the hallway outside the private room where he and his friends were gathered, I stopped short. From inside came bursts of laughter and loud chatter, followed by a teasing voice. "Come on, man. Let's do a little interview. Just 2 weeks until you get married and your girl on the side's already pregnant. How does that feel, Ethan?" I froze, my heart pounding painfully in my chest. I thought I must have misheard, but through the slightly open door I could see clearly, Ethan raising his glass, smiling like it was nothing. "Feels kind of exciting, actually," he said casually, shrugging his shoulders. The room erupted in laughter. "That's our Ethan, on top in business and in love, a sweet fiancée at home, a beautiful mistress outside. Every man's dream." Another friend joined in, laughing. "Seriously, who can compare with you, man? You're our idol." Sitting in the corner, Ryan chuckled knowingly. "Hey, future groom, maybe tone it down a little. Wouldn't want your bride finding out, huh?" Ethan just replied lazily, "As long as I keep it quiet, Emma will never know." Their laughter grew louder, more confident. "That's the way. With your status, sticking to one woman would be a waste. And that Lily girl, she wasn't forced into anything. She came to you willingly, so why not enjoy it?" Someone added, "Speaking of which, where is she? Someone call her in already." The moment I heard the name Lily, my entire body went cold. Lily was a junior I'd once helped wholeheartedly. I had given her scholarships, created opportunities for her, and supported her every step of the way. Then came the sharp sound of high heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. I instinctively hid behind a stone pillar as the door swung open. She walked in without hesitation, straight into Ethan's arms. He caught her naturally, effortlessly, like it was something they had practiced hundreds of times before. His hand rested on her waist, his eyes soft and tender, as if nothing about this moment was wrong. "Why aren't you home resting? It's snowing so hard outside," he said gently, still holding her close. "I wanted to surprise you. Aren't you happy to see me?" Lily's voice was playful, almost childlike. "Of course I am," Ethan murmured, then lowered his head and kissed her lips. No one in the room seemed surprised. It was as if they'd all grown used to such scenes. Ethan even spoke softly to the waiter nearby. "Take the wine out of here. Lily's pregnant. She can't stand the smell of alcohol." His friends burst into laughter. Our Ethan really treats Lily like gold, spoiling her rotten. I could barely breathe. Those were the same words I used to hear, back when I was still the only woman beside him. His friends used to praise him then too. "Emma's so lucky. Ethan really treats her well." At the time, he would wrap an arm around my waist and laugh, saying, "I'm the lucky one to have her." I used to proudly tell everyone that we'd been together since we were young. that we'd known each other for over a decade, understood each other completely, and would surely grow old side by side. But now I realized that what I had cherished and guarded for years was nothing more than a ridiculous play for others to laugh at behind my back. Just as humiliation burned through me, Lily's voice cut through the room, like the final knife twisting into my heart. "Ethan, you've always treated me so sincerely. It's just a shame I met you too late. If I had met you 2 years earlier, maybe I would be the bride now." The air in the room grew heavy. After a brief silence, Ethan spoke in a calm, indifferent tone. "Lily, have you ever heard this saying? If you want to marry a general, you have to marry him when he's still a soldier. Emma's been with me since I had nothing. For 6 long years of struggle and hardship, she never once let go of my hand. What do you have that can compare to that? What you need to do now is focus on taking care of the baby. Stop thinking about meaningless things, and don't you ever breathe a word of this in front of Emma." Lily's face turned pale. The atmosphere in the room grew tense until one of the men tried to ease it. "Come on, Ethan. Don't be mad. Lily understands. Emma will never find out about any of this." Lily's voice trembled as she choked back tears. "I'm sorry. I just don't think I'm any less than her. You told me once that Emma's family wasn't happy, that she must be starved for affection. Even if she did find out, she wouldn't be able to leave you." My hand gripped the doorknob tightly, trembling uncontrollably. My eyes burned, but I forced myself not to make a sound. Ethan frowned slightly, though his voice remained calm. "There won't be a next time. Do you understand?" Then, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret with the whole room, he added, "Emma once told me that if I ever betrayed her, she would disappear from my life forever. She said I wouldn't be able to live without her." I froze. Those words, those were mine. I had said them to him years ago, in the hospital, when I was admitted for exhaustion after helping him build his business from scratch. I still remembered sitting there with the lunchbox he had made, teasing him, "If you ever cheat on me, I'll make sure you lose everything. You'll be crippled and never see me again." He had held my hand back then, eyes red with emotion, swearing, "If I ever betray you, I'll have nothing left." Now he still remembered every word I had said, but he was using them, not out of love, but as a shield to protect his betrayal. I swallowed the nausea rising in my throat and stumbled down the stairs, my steps uneven. Outside, the snow was still falling softly, each flake touching the ground and melting away. Amid that fragile snowfall, the memories that had once been the pillars of my life crumbled, shattering like glass. "Emma, no matter what happens, I'll always be by your side. You're not just anyone, you're my only one. When the time is right, we'll have a grand wedding, so the whole world will know just how much I love you." Those words used to be my entire world. Now they were nothing but cruel echoes fading into the cold night. "I gave up my dreams for you so we could start this company together," I once told him. "I won't let you down, Emma," he had promised. "You'll never regret choosing me." "Emma, I'm drunk," he had laughed once, leaning against me. "Good thing you're here." Emma. Emma. All those vows, all those tender words that once made me believe in him completely, under the howling wind and falling snow, they now scattered into nothingness. All I could see in my mind was what I had just witnessed. In that warm, brightly lit room, he held another woman with gentle eyes and kissed her in front of everyone as if nothing in the world was wrong. The reality was too cruel. It hollowed me out from the inside, leaving me weightless, my stomach twisting in knots, my head spinning, my hands and feet numb. One of my heels slipped on the icy step, and I fell hard into the snow covering the path. Mr. Carter rushed from the car, panic written all over his face. "Miss Emma? Are you hurt?" I looked up at him, and suddenly everything became clear. His earlier words, "Why don't you bring him the coat yourself?" weren't just a simple suggestion. Maybe he had known all along. My voice trembled as I asked, eyes red and glassy, "How long has this been going on between them?" Mr. Carter avoided my gaze, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Miss Emma. I have 2 young children to raise. I can't afford to lose this job." I slowly stood up, brushing the snow from my clothes. I didn't ask anything more. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," I said softly. "You can go. I want to walk alone." Behind me, the man I had once trusted with my whole heart was holding another woman in his arms, while I stumbled through the snow, retracing the steps of our past, the years of passion and blind devotion. Back when we graduated, I had earned a full scholarship to study abroad, but I gave it up because he said he wanted to start over from nothing, to build his own company. So I abandoned everything, the ticket to the world, my own dream, just to stay by his side. My advisor had been furious. "If you ever regret this decision," he told me coldly, "don't come looking for me." But I was stubborn. To me, Ethan was the only light in a chaotic world. I truly believed that as long as I was with him, I would never have any regrets. We were so poor then that we couldn't even afford an apartment. We ended up renting a damp, freezing basement. In the winter, we'd huddle together for warmth. On rainy days, the water flooded the floor, and I had to throw away my only pair of shoes. Ethan had looked at me with guilt, but I had smiled and teased him. "Don't feel bad. Look, the water's so deep it feels like we're living in the Maldives." He had held me close, his voice full of determination. "We'll have a future, Emma. One day, I'll really take you to the Maldives. I won't ever let you suffer again." I had believed him, as if those words were unshakable truth. When we first started the company, I did everything: secretary, assistant, cleaner, whatever needed to be done. I didn't mind, as long as I could share the burden with him. At every business dinner, I stood by his side, joined every negotiation, every funding pitch, every dream yet to come true. Thanks to the rise of the internet, the company grew quickly. Everything gradually fell into place: more employees, defined titles, stability. One year, during the centennial anniversary of our old university, we made a large donation together. That was the moment I thought I had proven my decision years ago had been right. I returned to the university, wanting to see the professor who had once scolded me for my choice. But he refused to meet me. I left disappointed, my heart heavy. When I arrived back at the company gate, I saw Ethan's new secretary, a sharp, beautiful young woman with expressive eyes that followed him like sunlight. For the first time, unease began to stir inside me. To make a change, I personally suggested hiring someone else, someone I thought would be more trustworthy than Lily. That person was a junior from my university, a girl who had once received a scholarship from our company's foundation. I had believed I was helping her escape hardship, that I was giving her a chance at a better future. I had proudly guided her, step by step, like a mentor guiding a younger sister. And yet, in the end, the one I had nurtured and the man I had loved the most joined hands to stab me in the heart. How could I not feel pain? How could I not feel hatred? I hated Ethan for his deceit. I hated Lily for her betrayal. And most of all, I hated myself for being too naive, too blind, and becoming the punchline in the twisted play they had staged together. From beginning to end, I had been nothing more than a fool caught in a cruel tragedy, a puppet displayed behind glass for the world to see. When I had stood outside that door, I had wanted to burst in, to tear everything apart. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, reason pulled me back. What would I gain from creating a scene? Ethan would only stammer out apologies, push the blame onto Lily, act remorseful, slap himself, and kneel, begging for forgiveness. He'd bring up old memories, repeat old promises, and try to hold me back with guilt and sentiment, swearing to love me forever again. But now I understood. To a man like him, oaths were nothing more than the echo of a dog's bark, loud in the night but gone with the morning wind. I couldn't let a moment of rage destroy my future. I needed to stay calm, to think clearly. Above all, I needed to make them understand that my heart, Emma Taylor's heart, was not something anyone could shatter without paying the price. That night, Ethan came home very late. He was carrying a small gift box, his expression tinged with guilt. "Emma, I'm sorry," he said softly. "I stayed out too long. Ryan and the others wouldn't let me leave." I gave a faint, bitter smile. "Was it because they wouldn't let you go? Or because you didn't want to leave the party?" He didn't seem to notice the change in my tone. Lifting the box slightly as if to ease the tension, he said cheerfully, "Guess what I got for you?" I glanced at the paper bag and said flatly, "A cake." He blinked, clearly surprised. "How'd you know?" "Back when we were struggling to make ends meet, I used to love sweets. Those little cakes were what he often bought to cheer me up. Even after life got better, he kept that habit. I would always pretend to be surprised, giving him an excuse to smile, as if we were still holding on to the sweetness of the past. But now, I didn't even have the energy to pretend. I took the box from him and noticed a folded receipt tucked under the lid. "Why does this say you bought 2 cakes but you only brought 1 home?" He answered instantly, almost too quickly. "Oh, Ryan was with me. He wanted to get one for his wife, so I paid for both." I tilted my head slightly. "His wife was there too?" "No, not exactly," he said, his voice faltering. I opened the box and placed the small cake on the table in front of him. "Then why is there a bite taken out of it?" He froze mid-motion, his hand still holding his coat. The cake wasn't just missing a corner, it had a faint orange lipstick mark smudged along the edge. The mark was unmistakably left by a woman, either carelessly or on purpose, to provoke. I looked straight into his eyes, waiting for a reaction. For a brief moment, he looked startled, but quickly recovered. "It must have been a mix-up at the bakery," he said smoothly. "I'll take it back tomorrow and exchange it for a new one." I shook my head calmly. "No need. I'm cutting back on sugar lately. I don't have much of an appetite for cake." Then I pointed at the lipstick stain. "But this shade looks familiar. I bought one just like it last week." Ethan let out a laugh, sounding oddly relieved. "Really? I haven't seen you wear it." I smiled faintly. "You probably didn't notice, but I gave that lipstick to Lily." The hand Ethan had been holding tightened around mine. He was silent for a long moment before speaking softly. "You don't need to give gifts to anyone. What's yours, keep it for yourself." I looked up at him, my voice calm, almost eerily so. "But Lily isn't an outsider. I've always treated her like a younger sister. I took care of her when she was still in college, helped her with her studies, her job, everything. She's family to me. If she were ever to betray me, it would be no different than you betraying me." I looked straight into his eyes and asked in a whisper, "Ethan, have you and she betrayed me?" That was the last time I gave him a way out. If he had told the truth at that moment, I would have been willing to let go, to end things peacefully and walk our separate ways. But instead, he smiled with the same calmness as always. "Of course not. You're overthinking this, Emma." I smiled too, a weightless smile, sharp as a blade. "Good. I'm relieved to hear that." In that instant, I felt something heavy fall inside me. He hadn't chosen honesty, so he couldn't blame me for choosing cruelty. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, as if afraid I would vanish. His lips brushed against my neck, his breath warm and familiar. My whole body tensed, and I quickly stepped away. "I'm tired, not feeling well," I said quietly. He paused for a moment. "You've been stressing over the wedding too much. Let other people handle it. Stop pushing yourself so hard." I gently removed his hand from my shoulder and nodded. "I understand. You should get some rest." That night, I turned my back to him, lying still as stone. In the middle of the night, he carefully sat up, took his phone, and stepped out onto the balcony. Though he tried to keep his voice low, I could still hear the irritation in every word. The quiet of the night seemed to freeze time itself. I didn't move, didn't speak. I simply listened. The next morning, I arranged a private meeting with one of the top attorneys in the city, a woman known for her discretion and efficiency. After listening to my entire story, she sighed softly and offered her advice. "Miss Taylor, your company and Mr. Collins's firm are currently preparing for public listing. I strongly advise against any major disruption right now. Once the IPO is complete, the profits you'll gain will be substantial." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "In my experience, most of the women who've come to me under similar circumstances eventually choose to pretend nothing happened. As long as you go through with the wedding, the woman outside, pregnant or not, will never have any rightful place." I turned to look out the window. Snow tires ground against the soft white slush on the street below, leaving long streaks of dirty gray behind. Then I shook my head decisively. "No, Attorney Tran," I said firmly. "If I keep wasting my time and energy fighting people who don't deserve it, that would be the real loss. I don't want to keep holding on to trash. To welcome something better, you have to learn to let go of what's toxic." I paused, my voice softening but my resolve steady. "You know, a life eroded by unhappiness is like drowning in a whirlpool. You get dragged deeper and deeper until you can't breathe. And I'm too tired to keep fighting it. At this point, The assets and shares I hold are enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I don't need anything more. My only goal now is to liquidate all my holdings as soon as possible. A faint smile crossed my lips, like a weight had just been lifted. In fact, I've already booked a plane ticket. I'll be leaving in 2 weeks. I want to settle everything before I go. My eyes narrowed slightly as I spoke my final words. Besides, whether the company actually goes public or not, that's still uncertain. Attorney Tran froze for a brief moment, then smiled brightly. Miss Taylor, it'll be my pleasure to assist you. As for the evidence of Mr. Collins's affair, my team will begin collecting it immediately. Within 3 days, I'll have the division of shares and assets fully prepared. You can rest assured, Attorney Tran said warmly. Thank you, I replied. After that meeting, I immediately began packing my things, preparing to leave this place for good. As I was sorting through old belongings, a notification suddenly appeared on WeChat. It was from Lily. The photo she sent showed her in a white spaghetti strap dress, smiling brightly under the sunlight, while Ethan leaned down to kiss her belly. Emma, her message began, I know you saw us that day. I don't want to hide it anymore. The baby I'm carrying, it's Ethan's. We've been together for over a year now. You've helped me so much already, but please, help me one last time. Give him up. Let me have him. I stared blankly at the screen, anger and disbelief swirling in my chest. Everyone knows about me except you, her next message continued. Those times when he said he was working late, he was actually with me. You can't have children, so I'll have them for you. You probably don't know, but his mother has already met me. She treats me like her own daughter. Emma Taylor, what do you have that I don't? You're only a few years older than me. You were just lucky to meet Ethan earlier. I'm not inferior to you in any way. My hands trembled violently. I almost dropped the phone. Can't have children? But I once did. 3 years ago, after a heated argument with a business partner, Ethan had driven like a madman along a mountain road. I had begged him to stop, but he ignored me completely. When the car lost control and plunged into the lake, I didn't hesitate for even a second. I jumped in after him to pull him out. That night, the snow was as white as it is now. When the ambulance arrived, I was the first one they carried out, me and the child I would never meet. My body had always been weak, and the time in the freezing water made it worse. The doctor said I had almost no chance of ever conceiving again. That day, Ethan had knelt by my hospital bed, tears streaming down his face. We don't need children, he had said. As long as I have you, that's enough. But a few years later, here we were. If I had known that the man I had risked my life to save would one day turn his back on me so cruelly, I would have left him there, forever, beneath that frozen lake. Just as I was struggling to hold back tears, the door creaked open. Ethan walked in, his expression calm, his familiar smile fixed in place. I'm home, Emma. When he saw my tear-streaked face, his steps faltered. Concern flickered in his eyes. What's wrong? Why are you crying? He walked over and pulled me into his arms, gently patting my back. Tell me who made you sad, he whispered tenderly. I'll take care of it for you. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. It's nothing. I just watched a sad movie. The main character couldn't have children, and her husband cheated on her, then left her. I paused, my eyes quietly locking onto his. You know I can't have children either. Have you ever thought about? Before I could finish, he held me tighter. Don't say things like that. It's fine, Emma. You're still taking your medication every day. We'll have a baby someday. I shook my head. I'm tired, Ethan. I don't want to take it anymore. He kissed my forehead softly and whispered, If you don't want to, then stop. We don't need kids. As long as you're with me, that's all I need. It was my fault. If I hadn't been reckless that night, you wouldn't have suffered like this. My eyelids trembled, and my voice cracked. No, it was my own stupidity. All for a child. I turned myself into a walking pharmacy, wrecking my health, just because you once said, I love kids. I looked straight at him, my voice steady but cold. Ethan, you know my family background. I don't have parents. I don't have anyone else. I was terrified that once we got married, if I couldn't give you a child, you'd stop loving me. I wiped away the last of my tears. That's why I need something certain. Sign a prenuptial agreement with me. The sound of running water echoed faintly from the bathroom, and on the table nearby lay his phone, still unlocked. The phone on the table kept vibrating non-stop with incoming messages. Ethan, it's only been a little while apart, and I already miss you. Sending you a kiss, with a photo too. I glanced at the screen, my heart perfectly still, no longer stirred by anything. Quietly, I picked up my own phone and stepped out onto the balcony to make a call. Attorney Tran, he's agreed to sign it. Please prepare the contract and send it to me tomorrow. The remaining procedures after I leave the country, I'll leave them in your hands. Just as I finished speaking, the glass door behind me slid open. I hung up immediately and turned around. Ethan had just come out of the shower, his body still covered in a soft mist of warmth. His eyes held a hint of suspicion. Leaving the country? Who's going? I answered casually, Oh, Attorney Tran, she's helping me draft the prenuptial agreement. He chuckled, half teasing, half surprised. So you've got a lawyer friend now? There was a trace of mockery in his tone, a flicker of arrogance in his eyes. For years I'd stayed at home, too frail to socialize much. He must have thought I'd never had the means or connections to meet someone like her. That same complacency was what made him so confident in his betrayal, believing I'd never find out. I smiled faintly. At the gala last year, remember? I was embarrassed when I misspoke in front of some guests. She's the one who stepped in to help me. Ethan nodded. Right, he murmured, not asking further. He slipped an arm around my waist. If signing that paper will make you feel secure, I don't mind at all. He whispered the words against my ear, his breath warm on my skin, wrapping the air around us in a murky haze. I tilted my head away slightly and pointed toward the table. Your phone's been buzzing non-stop. I think someone's waiting for your reply. His hand froze under the edge of my blouse. After a brief pause, he nodded. All right, I'll check. A moment later, his voice came from inside the room, uneasy. Emma, you didn't happen to look at my phone, did you? I lifted my gaze, expressionless. Why? Is there something wrong? He laughed nervously. No, just work stuff, that's all. Then, forcing a smile, he took my hand. I'll be leaving for a business trip soon. Might not be back until right before the wedding. Don't overwork yourself, okay? Get some rest. I smiled calmly and nodded, my face unreadable. The next day, I received the signed prenuptial agreement from Ethan Collins. Just as planned, he hadn't suspected a thing. For someone as greedy as him, the document seemed harmless, profitable, even. All the existing assets, cash, joint properties, and scattered investments were legally reassigned to me. Meanwhile, the company shares under my name were transferred to him. He probably thought I was foolish, unable to grasp the true value of equity. That arrogance only made him more careless. And on the very day he left for his business trip, I happened to see a post from Lily on social media. Off to the Maldives. She'd written it as if she wanted to make sure I saw it. Over the next few days, I kept checking her posts. They were filled with romantic, dreamy photos, a perfect vacation in paradise. The two of them watched the sunrise over the ocean, held hands at sunset, kissed beneath a sky full of stars. The Maldives trip Ethan and I had once dreamed about, back when we were huddled together in that cold, cramped basement, had finally come true. The only difference was, the woman by his side wasn't me. I didn't feel pain anymore, just a bitter, quiet amusement. The man who once swore he'd build a bright future with me, who had carried me on his back through the night with bloodied feet, who had stood beside me when our company was nothing but an idea, had now chosen someone else to share the dream we once built together. Now, he was nothing more than a fading silhouette in a dream that had long since died. I had never once doubted the love we shared in the past. But what I had thought was sincerity, true devotion, turned out to be something that could change in the blink of an eye. The very next day, I contacted a broker to sell off all the real estate under my name. Then I called a moving company to clear out every piece of furniture and item in the house. All the things I had once chosen so carefully, piece by piece, with the hope of building a home together, gone. Finally, I stepped into the study, opened the cabinet, and took out every photo album, every handwritten letter, every keepsake. I burned them all. The feeling of being 17, when he carried me on his back through the pouring rain, the sweetness of young love at 20, the fiery ambition of our shared dreams at 23. All of it turned to ash, disappearing into smoke. The past that had once shackled me like chains, I had now broken with my own hands. On the eve of our wedding, Ethan came home, his face glowing with excitement, like a child on holiday. But when he stepped into the house, his expression froze. He looked around, startled. What happened? Did someone break in? I had already anticipated that question. Smiling calmly, I replied, We're about to get married, so I thought I'd start fresh, get rid of everything old, make a new beginning. I used your card for it, by the way. You didn't even text me while you were away. My tone carried just the right amount of playful complaint, enough to make him feel guilty but not suspicious. He sighed in relief, wrapping his arms around me affectionately. Emma, I've been so swamped lately I haven't noticed anything. Go ahead and buy whatever you want. My money's your money, after all. You should have done this sooner. New space, new mood. I smiled, but inside, I felt nothing but cold emptiness. Avoiding his gaze, I changed the subject. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He chuckled and kissed my forehead. Guess I'll listen to my future wife then. It took everything in me not to flinch. There was a time when I had waited for this wedding with all my heart. I had planned every single detail, from the invitations to the ceremony schedule, from the dress to the lighting of the venue. But if the me from 2 weeks ago could see what would happen today, how I would end everything on the very day I was supposed to walk down the aisle, she never would have believed it. The things that once consumed me no longer mattered. The only thing I cared about now was the guest list, filled with friends, business partners, and most importantly, the media. I hadn't invited them to capture the happiest moment of my life. Sitting in the makeup room, I smiled faintly at my reflection. Through the thin wall, I could hear Ethan's cheerful voice greeting guests, his laughter warm and confident. Beside him, I heard Lily's shrill, tinkling laugh. It scraped against my nerves like broken glass. That morning, she had shamelessly sent me another taunting message. I hadn't even bothered to reply. My heart was calm now, consumed by only one desire, freedom. No amount of venom from her could reach me anymore. I called Attorney Tran. Everything later depends on you, I said quietly. Her voice was steady and firm. Don't worry, Miss Taylor. Everything's ready. I nodded and stood up just as the wedding staff came knocking, reminding me it was time to change into my gown. But instead of walking into the dressing room, I slipped out the back door, pressed the elevator button, and descended straight to the basement. I removed the SIM card from my phone, tossed it into a trash bin near the emergency exit, and got into my car. The engine roared to life, and I drove north toward the highway. Cold northern winds lashed against the windshield, but I felt strangely light, almost peaceful. In every gust of wind, I could taste freedom, the thing that had been taken from me for years. I was finally reclaiming myself, being reborn from the ruins. And as for the two who had betrayed me, they could enjoy their moment of triumph for now. The storm I had carefully gathered was about to break right over their heads. The next piece of news I heard about Ethan came through a long-distance call while I was studying at a quiet university somewhere in Europe. Attorney Tran's voice came through the line, laced with a restrained excitement. After you disappeared from the wedding, I followed the plan exactly. The evidence of his affair was broadcast right onto the giant screen in the middle of the ceremony. The press went wild. People came to attend a wedding but ended up watching a live soap opera instead. I narrowed my eyes toward the bright summer sky and let out a small laugh. You sound a little too pleased. Where's that professional lawyer composure now? She chuckled. If you can laugh, then I can relax. Hearing your voice, I can tell you're doing fine. I turned my gaze to the sea beyond the window. The waves shimmered in endless shades of blue, stretching all the way to the horizon. Fine? More than fine, I said softly. I don't even know why I never realized before. The world is such a beautiful place. There was a brief pause before Attorney Tran spoke again, her voice hesitant, almost apologetic. This might sound a little nosy, but I just have to ask. After the video started playing, Ethan rushed straight to the airport. On the way, he was hit by a car, broke his leg. I know, I replied calmly. It was all over the domestic news. What about it? The accident isn't the strange part, she continued. His family wanted to sue the driver, but after a short talk between them, Ethan suddenly dropped all charges. That driver was someone you arranged, wasn't he? What did you tell him to say? The gentle rhythm of waves echoed softly in the background, like nature itself was listening. I smiled faintly and answered slowly. I just told him to remind Ethan of the promise he made years ago. A memory surfaced. Of a dark basement long ago, of his hand gripping mine as he vowed, "If I ever betray you, I'll lose everything. I'll be broke, my leg will be broken, and I'll never see you again." People should always learn to pay the price for their own arrogant words. And I was only just beginning to make him pay, piece by piece. Attorney Tran sighed. His company's in chaos, the media's tearing him apart, and the IPO plans completely collapsed. Don't you want to come back and see the fallout? I smiled faintly. You're mistaken. That's not my company anymore, and I have no interest in watching someone else fall apart. The other end of the line went silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her tone had grown more serious. There's one more thing. Your mother, Mrs. Q, is in critical condition. She's asking to see you one last time. The smile on my lips froze instantly. My return home happened sooner than planned. Nearly a month later, I set foot again in my hometown, a city blanketed in white snow. The woman I called mother, the one I hadn't seen in years, was lying propped up on her hospital bed, looking healthier than I'd expected. A housekeeper sat beside her, peeling fruit with meticulous care. The moment my mother saw me, she gasped in surprise. "Emma, you're back?" Before I could answer, her face hardened into disapproval. "I heard about the scene you caused at your wedding. How shameful. A woman should know better than to humiliate herself like that. You embarrassed our whole family." Not a single word of concern. Not even a question of whether I was all right. Just reproach, as if I were the only villain in the entire tragedy. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone calm. "Mom, Ethan cheated on me. He has a child with another woman." Her expression froze for a second, then fury returned to her face. All men make mistakes now and then, especially someone as successful as Ethan. If you can't give him a child, of course he has to find someone who can. What do you expect him to do, end the family line? I couldn't bear a son either, and your father beat me for it constantly. That's just how life is. Emma, don't be so selfish. Go apologize to Ethan. If you just humble yourself a little, everything can still be saved. I said nothing. My heart felt like a block of ice. If you've suffered your whole life just because you couldn't bear a son, I said quietly, my voice trembling with anger, then what am I to you? Just a substitute? Ethan will be here soon, my mother snapped. He still has feelings for you, and is willing to give you another chance. Don't make things worse. I looked at her, my gaze sharp as a blade. He's the one who asked you to call me back, isn't he? Her eyes flickered with guilt. She grasped my hand anxiously. Emma, I'm only doing this for your own good. You're a woman. You'll need a man to depend on someday. Besides, Ethan knows everything about our past. Your reputation's already ruined. If you can't hold on to him, who else do you think would want you? I yanked my hand free, too numb to look at her again. Without a word, I turned and walked away. Behind me, her voice cracked with desperation. Emma, Emma. But I didn't look back. Her shouting echoed down the hallway, dragging me violently back into a memory I had buried for more than a decade. Back then, I had just finished my college entrance exams, filled with hope for the future. But my father had no interest in my dreams. Instead, he accepted a dowry from a crude man from the neighboring village, a brute everyone called Mad Tom, and decided I would marry him. I fought back with everything I had, but deep inside, I knew it was useless. So I made a plan to run away. That last night in the house, the summer air was thick and suffocating, seeping through the wooden window frames. The breeze was warm, but I didn't feel sleepy, only an exhilarating rush in my chest. I had arranged to meet Ethan at dawn. He had promised to help me escape, to start a new life together. As I lay awake, I heard my mother crying softly in the next room. Her muffled sobs tore at my chest, but before I could move, a shadow leapt through my window. A man crashed into my room. I screamed and ran for the door, but it was bolted from the outside. My father's voice bellowed from the hall. Emma, it's Tom. He's a good man with money. Stop being foolish, you're a woman. Getting married is better than wasting your life studying. I scrambled out of bed, but the tiny room left nowhere to run. The man grabbed me, his face grotesque, pockmarked and glistening with sweat, his breath reeking of alcohol. He pinned me to the bed like an animal in heat. I struggled desperately, but my strength was nothing compared to his. When his filthy hands ripped at my shirt, something inside me snapped. Under my pillow was the small knife I always kept for protection. Without thinking, I grabbed it and drove it deep into his body. A terrifying scream split the air. Warm blood splattered across my face. Trembling, I shoved him off me and backed toward the door. My father burst in just as the man collapsed onto the floor, writhing in agony. I stood blocking the doorway, the knife still in my hand, dripping red. My voice came out calm, too calm. I'm going to school, and no one will stop me again. Then I ran, out of that suffocating house, still clutching the blood-stained knife. The rain came down in heavy sheets, slapping against my face. The wind howled, but it couldn't drown out the sound of my heartbeat pounding like a drum. Behind me, my father shouted, his voice hoarse with fury as he chased after me. "Ungrateful wretch! You ran off with that penniless bastard, didn't you? He's perfect for trash like you." Shame burned through me when I saw Ethan wading ahead on the muddied path, standing by the ridge. He didn't speak, he just knelt, letting me climb onto his back, and then he ran through the storm, through the darkness. "Don't be afraid," he whispered beside my ear. "I'm here." As he carried me forward, the rain poured harder, washing the blood from my clothes, carrying away the last trace of that night's horror. The blood spread across my skin like a nightmare being washed away by the rain. Ethan stopped under the small roof of a shrine and gently set me down, his hands trembling as he checked me from head to toe. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, my fingers still shaking uncontrollably. "It's not my blood." He pulled me into his arms, panic flashing in his eyes. "What happened? Tell me everything." I trusted him completely. Without holding anything back, I told him everything: the dowry, the forced marriage, the man who broke into my room, the knife, the blood. Ethan didn't get angry, he just held me tighter, his voice steady against the storm. "It's okay. I'm here. I'll always be here with you." In that moment, in his arms, I truly believed I had been saved. Then I whispered, my voice hoarse, "I don't want to be called Emma Q anymore. That name. It hurts too much. I want a new one." He stroked my back softly and said, "All right, tomorrow I'll take you to change it." The next morning I sneaked back home and stole the family registration papers. Together, we went to the local police station. It took a long time, begging, pleading, but finally, they approved it. From that day on, I was no longer Emma Q. I was Emma Taylor. Ethan had smiled at me that morning and said, "You're not that girl anymore. You're Emma, my precious gem. Don't worry, from now on, no one will ever mention your old name again." I believed him. I believed I had finally found the one person who would protect me. I told him everything, every secret, every scar. It was like gambling my soul on one final chance at love. But what I had once thought was trust turned into mockery. Ethan told Lily about my past. Then he told his friends. The story that should have stayed buried became gossip over their drinks, sneering jokes, whispered pity, and cruel laughter that still echoes in my head. The love I had cherished with all my heart had turned into a blade that cut straight through it. For every bit of gratitude I once felt toward him, I now carried an equal measure of hatred. In this lifetime, I never wanted to see Ethan Collins again. I walked quickly down the long corridor of the hospital, every step carrying me further from everything that had once chained me. But as I turned the corner near the stairwell, I froze. Ethan was there, limping, his crutch slipping on the polished floor with a sharp clatter. I immediately turned away, intending to leave, but his voice, low, rough, desperate, rang out behind me. "Emma." People in the busy hallway turned to look, and then, with a loud thud, he fell to the ground, groaning in pain. I stopped and turned around, arms crossed, my face expressionless. "Say it quickly. I don't have time for games." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with panic and something like heartbreak, as if my coldness had pierced straight through him. "Emma, please, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I can't lose you. Don't leave me." I closed my eyes for a moment, fighting the wave of nausea rising inside me. He had gotten Lily pregnant, and now he dared to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. Did he really think I was that pathetic? "It's not like that," he stammered, his voice cracking. "There's nothing between us. She reminded me of you somehow. That's all." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "That's funny, so funny it's almost tragic." I'm still alive, Ethan, I said coldly. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me, and if you've already betrayed me, don't you dare pretend you're still in love. My voice cut through the air like a knife. If you'd had the courage to admit you stopped loving me, maybe I'd still respect you a little, but now, all I feel is disgust. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He just stared, speechless, like a man watching everything he ever wanted slip away. I met his eyes one last time, unflinching, and don't think you can use my mother to manipulate me again. Once was enough. I won't fall for the same trap twice. Then I turned and walked away without looking back. That night, my mother's number flashed on my screen again and again. The phone rang endlessly, until I finally blocked the call. In that exact moment, I felt something inside me go completely still, like the final thread tying me to the past had finally snapped. That was when I finally understood. The woman I had once pitied most, the one I had endured and excused because I believed she too was a victim of a cruel and outdated world, turned out to be the one who hurt me the deepest, and she did it with calm conviction, even loyalty. Before I turned 25, I only saw her hardships and sacrifices. I never realized that hidden within those sacrifices were blindness and selfishness. I once swore I would give my mother a comfortable life. And I did. After Ethan and I found success in business, I brought her to the city to see the first house I'd ever bought, a home built from every ounce of sweat and every tear I had shed. But instead of pride or joy, her eyes held only suspicion at first, then emptiness, and finally quiet bitterness. I still remember her voice, tight with resentment, saying, "If only you were a son." Just one sentence, and everything I had ever wanted to say turned to ashes on my tongue. That day I understood. I could take her body out of that old village, but I could never free her mind from generations of ingrained prejudice. I knew the fault wasn't entirely hers. She was also a victim of her time, born into a world that taught women only how to sacrifice, obey, and stay silent. I had pitied her. I had been grateful for the years she spent struggling to raise me. I had wanted to repay her with everything I had. But after everything that's happened, all I can feel now is disappointment and cold detachment. I resent her for siding with the man I despise most, for betraying me, for refusing to see right from wrong. To her, I was never a daughter, just a pawn on the board of her own fears and ambitions. The distance between us had stretched too far, and it could never return to what it once was, back when I still believed she loved me. Now I see it clearly. She didn't love me. She loved the image of the perfect son-in-law she had built in her mind. She loved the man who stood behind me, not the daughter standing right before her. And so, I will never delude myself again. From this day forward, I won't seek love or approval from anyone else. All I need to do is learn how to love myself. Outside, snow was falling thick across the sky, grounding every flight indefinitely. I had no choice but to book a room at a small hotel near the airport to wait out the storm. Downstairs, under the dim yellow lights of the lobby, Ethan sat motionless, his face pale and weary in his hospital clothes. He looked broken, lost in a way he had never been before. For years, he had been the man who always succeeded, the one who never faltered. Now, he was just hollow. The front desk called my room several times, asking gently if I might go down to see him, since he was unwell. But sympathy no longer had power over me. If he was sick, he should go to the hospital, not come looking for me. It wasn't until his mother showed up, her hands red and trembling from the cold, that I finally opened the door. I could turn away anyone else, but not an elderly woman shivering in a snowstorm. I invited her in and poured a cup of hot tea, setting it in front of her as a final gesture of respect. We had never been close. Back when Ethan and I were just starting out, she would always take my hand and smile brightly whenever we met. "Emma," she used to say, "having you by Ethan's side puts my heart at ease. My boy, finding you is the greatest blessing our family could have. If he ever wrongs you, come to me. I'll always be on your side." I used to believe those words. I thought I was lucky to have found such a kind, open-hearted mother-in-law. But that illusion shattered after my accident. Her tone had been soft but firm. "Emma, it's nothing complicated," she said gently. "The Collins family has only one son for 3 generations. Ethan must have a child. You should take better care of yourself, recover soon so you can get pregnant. From kind persuasion to emotional pressure, from coaxing to subtle threats, she always maintained a polite, graceful composure, yet she never wavered in her one goal, ensuring the family line continued. But the woman standing before me now looked so frail and broken that, for a moment, I was startled. It had been less than a month since the wedding, yet she seemed to have aged years. Her once dark hair was streaked with white, and her eyes, once sharp and confident, had dimmed. She reached for my hands, her voice trembling with desperation. "Emma, they say broken bones take time and care to heal, but my son, he can't eat, he can't sleep, his body's giving out, he's already paid for his mistakes. And that girl, Lily, I met her myself. I swear, once she gives birth, the baby will be yours to raise. Please, can't you two go back to how things were?" I pulled my hands away, my voice calm but icy. "That's impossible, Mrs. Collins." Her face darkened, her tone losing its softness. "Then what more do you want? The company's ruined, Ethan's suffered enough. Can't you forgive him?" A faint, bitter smile curved on my lips, even as something in my chest twisted painfully. "Forgive him? How could I?" 10 years of love," I said quietly, "and this is what's left. One of us shattered completely, and the other is half dead inside. And you tell me I should just let it go? If I forgive him now, wouldn't that mean admitting my entire life has been nothing more than a transaction? That I'm exactly what my father always said, a worthless woman, born only to suffer, never deserving of her own name? The name Emma, the one I chose for myself, it means something. And I won't betray it just to soothe anyone's conscience." Mrs. Collins stood frozen for a moment, then her face crumpled and she began to cry. "Even if you can't forgive him," she pleaded, "do it for me. Please, convince him to return to the hospital. It's snowing so heavily, he can't survive out there much longer." Before I could react, she sank to her knees before me, her frail body trembling, her voice barely steady. "I have no one else to turn to. I'm begging you." I hated Ethan. I despised Lily, and even toward my own parents, I carried a deep, unhealed resentment. But this woman, I couldn't hate her. A part of me even envied Ethan for having someone who loved him this fiercely. Because no matter how much he failed, his mother would always take his side. When he first started his business, she had gone out of her way to win me over. When I couldn't get pregnant, she pressured me, always with a smile. When Lily became pregnant, she shielded her completely. And now that Ethan lay in a hospital bed, she was willing to kneel before me in the cold. Everything she did, all of it was for her son. She could play any role, wear any mask, sacrifice everything, as long as he was safe. My parents, on the other hand, they had never cared about right or wrong. They would rather join hands with others to push me into ruin, without a trace of mercy. I couldn't stand seeing Mrs. Collins kneeling like that any longer. Finally, I sighed, put on my coat, and walked downstairs. Some things needed to be ended face to face, clearly and decisively, without another shadow of doubt. When our eyes met in the long hospital corridor, Ethan's expression flickered. For a moment, a spark of hope lit up his exhausted face, as if he had just found a way out of a storm. But my cold, unreadable stare extinguished it just as quickly. The faint smile forming on his lips disappeared, replaced by confusion and helplessness. "Emma?" he said softly, almost pleading, his voice rough and unsteady. "You really came." He gestured toward his leg, still wrapped in heavy bandages, forcing out a weak smile. "It's good you're here. Every time I hit rock bottom, you're always the one who shows up." He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Do you remember? Back when I was building my first company, I used to drink every night. You'd always make me soup to sober up. And that winter, when we went up north to sign the contract, it was snowing just like this. Snow had covered both our heads that night. Do you remember what you said back then?" Ethan asked softly. "Do you still remember?" I didn't let him finish. My voice cut through his words, cold and sharp. "Enough, don't bring it up again." Of course I remembered. Back then, in that sea of white snow, I had looked up at him half joking, half serious. "Ethan," I said, "don't we look like one of those old married couples who'll stay together for life?" But those memories that once warmed me, when placed beside his betrayal, now cut like knives. I had turned down a prestigious overseas scholarship to stay and build a future with him. I spent countless nights in a damp, windowless basement, listening to his plans, his dreams, his ambitions. I had stood by him through every failure, every sleepless night, every bitter moment. And when success finally came, he placed the brightest part of that glory into someone else's hands. Those memories he tried to resurrect didn't move me. They only disgusted me. They made me realize how blind I once was. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice icy and precise. Ethan Collins, you dragged me through your worst years and then gave your best ones to Lily. And now you still have the audacity to talk about the past as if it means something? I came here not because I care, I continued quietly, but because I pity your mother, a woman nearly 60, still worrying about her 30-year-old son who refuses to grow up. You betrayed me, I said flatly, and I made sure you paid for it. Whatever existed between us ended the moment I brought you to this hospital. Consider it erased. The entire way to the hospital, he said nothing. He just stared blankly out the window, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. When we arrived and he lay back on the hospital bed, pale under the thin sunlight, he finally reached for my sleeve, his voice trembling. Emma, please forgive me. I pulled my arm away, gave a small, cold smile, and walked out without another word. Just as I reached the door, someone blocked my path. Lily, heavily pregnant, her face drawn and pale, but her tone full of arrogance. Emma Taylor, she sneered. In the end, I'm the one who won. I turned slowly, my expression calm. You're right, you did win. Then I smiled faintly. You're lucky you knew when to beg for scraps. You won a crippled, faithless man and a company on the verge of collapse. Such a victory. I can't tell if I should congratulate you or pity you. Her face twisted, faltering for a moment before she snapped back, trying to sound defiant. Laugh all you want. You're good at taking things that don't belong to you, but once Ethan gets back on his feet, he'll rebuild everything. You'll see. I met her gaze one last time and said evenly, then I hope you have the patience to wait for that day. I didn't have the strength or the interest to argue with someone like her. People like that. Time would judge them better than I ever could. Truth always has a way of revealing itself. The day I left the city, the snow had finally stopped. The air was still cold, sharp with the scent of winter. At the airport, I saw my old professor, the man who had guided me through all my university years, waiting quietly in his wheelchair. His hair was now completely white, but his eyes were still warm. Behind him stood his wife, smiling gently, like a painting of winter light. I heard you're flying today, he said, his voice steady. We came to see you off. When I found out about Ethan's betrayal, I hadn't cried. When I listened to my mother defend his actions, I hadn't shed a tear. But hearing my professor's calm, simple words, it was like something inside me cracked open. The walls I had built around my heart crumbled, and the tears came uncontrollably. His wife looked worried. Why are you crying, dear? I couldn't answer. I just heard my professor speak again, his voice gentle as ever. Winter has passed, he said. The spring breeze will come soon, bringing warmth. Maybe that's why your eyes sting and your heart softens. People always feel more deeply when spring is near. I nodded through the tears, my throat tight. Yes, winter has passed. We found a small cafe near the airport entrance and sat by the window. Outside, the last traces of snow were melting on the sidewalk. My professor sipped his coffee, then said softly, When you graduated, my professor said softly, I regretted the words I spoke to you back then. I was too harsh. I always wanted to apologize, but the right moment never came. I shook my head quickly. You weren't wrong, Professor. I was the one who was too stubborn. At that time, there were only a few overseas scholarships available in our department, and I was one of the students selected. But I gave it all up, to stay behind with the man I loved, to help him build his dream from nothing. My professor had been so angry he nearly landed in the hospital. He had shouted at me that day, his voice trembling with both fury and disappointment. Opportunities in life are limited. Don't throw away what others would give everything to have. And then, quieter, with bitterness in his tone, he'd added, 10 years from now, if you regret it, don't come looking for me. It hadn't even been 10 years, and yet I understood his words better than anyone ever could. For the longest time, I hadn't had the courage to face him, until today. His wife smiled gently, breaking the heavy silence. When he saw the news about you, he kept muttering to himself, she teased softly. And then he started blaming himself. The older he gets, the more superstitious he becomes. I smiled faintly, warmth spreading in my chest for the first time in a long while. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup, still warm between my hands. My professor cleared his throat, clearly embarrassed, and changed the subject. I heard you've been studying in Europe and that you've applied to continue your research there. I'm glad, Emma. You haven't given up on yourself. That's all that matters. Then he reached into his coat pocket and took out a sealed envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. This is a letter of recommendation, he said, his voice filled with quiet sincerity. It's addressed to the Dean of the School of Architecture at UCL. Take it with you. I can't do much to help, but I still hope you'll continue down the path you should never have strayed from. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the envelope, gratitude flooding through me. He looked at me, his voice lowering into something like a whisper, yet each word carried weight. The road ahead of you is still long. The pain, the injustice, the heartbreak, all of it is part of growing up. It may hurt down to your bones, but once you endure it, nothing else will ever defeat you. You're still young, Emma. You can always start over. Yes, I could still start over. There was still time to live a different life, one built on choices that were truly mine. Outside, a plane cut through the sky, its wings slicing past thin layers of cloud. The snow was melting. I used to think that winter would last forever, that the ice in my heart would never thaw. But I was wrong. It only took a single breath of spring air for the ground to soften and the flowers to bloom. My life, too, after being frozen for so long, was finally stepping into its own spring. From the perspective of Ethan's father, I met Emma one late autumn afternoon, back when she was still just a young woman. There was something both strong and distant about her, a quiet resilience that set her apart. Even in a simple student uniform, she carried herself with a kind of natural elegance, like a flower growing out of reach, too pure to be touched by ordinary hands. Every step she took was firm, deliberate. Her hair was always tied neatly, her posture straight and proud, as if she had never once bowed to the weight of life. At first glance, anyone would have thought Emma came from wealth and refinement, a girl raised in comfort and grace. But when I later learned that her real name had once been Chiode, a humble, rural name that few in the city would even know how to pronounce, my illusions began to crumble. She had escaped from a poor village, and my friends in the city used to tell me how lucky I was. "You've won the heart of a girl like that," they said, "a woman who's like a wildflower growing on a cliff, rare, untouchable, impossible to reach." I believed them. Being with Emma was the greatest fortune of my life. She gave up her scholarship abroad just to stay by my side, to help me build my company from scratch in Beijing. In those early, grueling days, we shared a damp, dim basement room. No sunlight, no warmth, just a single bowl of chicken noodles split between us. She never once complained, never once stepped back. Thinking about it now, maybe that was the most peaceful time of my life. But when the company began to rise, when the parties grew endless, when the praise and flattery surrounded me from every direction, I started to feel tired. Every day became a carbon copy of the last, filled with business meetings, partnership deals, events, and the endless parade of beautiful women presented to me as if they were rewards for my success. I kept my distance. I turned them all down until Lily appeared. She had once been Emma's student, a recipient of a scholarship from our company's charity fund. Her timid, delicate demeanor was the complete opposite of Emma's. Emma was strong, sharp, and meticulous in everything she did. Lily, on the other hand, was clumsy and fragile. The slightest harsh word could bring tears to her eyes. At first, her weakness irritated me, but one night at a business dinner, she suddenly stood up and drank in my place before a table full of men. That impulsive act caught me off guard. Then a friend leaned over and said something that sank deep into my mind. "Ethan, with your status, isn't it a shame to spend your whole life with just one woman?" I nodded, just once, in a reckless moment, telling myself it would be temporary, something meaningless. I thought I could go back to Emma afterward, as if nothing had happened. I never intended to spend my life with Lily, the only woman I ever truly wanted to build a future with. The only one I loved from beginning to end was Emma. I always believed I could control everything, until Lily got pregnant. She didn't tell me, she told my mother instead. After the accident years ago, the doctors had warned that Emma's chances of conceiving were slim. My mother was adamant. The baby had to be kept. And that was the moment I walked willingly into the trap I had built for myself. I began living two lives, one beside Emma, and one in the shadows with Lily. What began as fear soon became habit. I convinced myself that if I was careful enough, Emma would never find out. But one night, during a party, a friend named Thomas leaned in with a smirk. "Ethan," he said, "you and Emma were the golden couple back in college. Aren't you afraid she'll find out about your new sister here?" I gave a short, cynical laugh. "Never. Emma has no one but me. She grew up unloved without me. There's no one else who'd care for her." And to make my lie sound more believable, I went on to reveal pieces of her past, dark, painful details she had once trusted me with, as if belittling her would somehow protect me. Lily curled up in my arms that night, her voice soft and syrupy. "If she's not that great, then why don't you marry me? Give our baby a name, a real family." I felt rage boil in my chest. I wanted to wrap my hands around her throat right there. "Who do you think you are?" I hissed. "You'd better behave. If Emma ever finds out, I'll destroy you." I squeezed her neck hard, as if force alone could silence her forever. But there's no wall in this world thick enough to stop the wind. When Emma's eyes began to change, when her words grew cold and her silences longer, I knew she had found out. But I kept lying to myself, clinging to a threadbare hope. She wouldn't leave me. We were about to get married. Until that day at the wedding ceremony, when the images appeared on the massive screen. No words, no explanations, everything laid bare. My heart stopped. I ran to the airport, convinced she'd be there. But Emma had anticipated every move I would make. The driver she had hired repeated the same vows I had once spoken to her, flat, mechanical, merciless. And in that moment, I felt something tear apart inside me. As everything I'd built began to collapse, I finally understood what true despair was. My career disintegrated almost overnight. The company's stock trading was suspended. Investors turned their backs. Rumors spread like wildfire. And while I was drowning in chaos, our biggest rival moved swiftly and quietly, taking the opportunity to go public just before us, seizing every advantage we'd lost. My company fell into crisis almost overnight. Every attempt to save it failed, and the only solution left, the most painful one, was to let it be bought out. I thought I was ready to face anyone across the negotiation table, but I hadn't expected that the person sitting across from me would be Thomas. He offered me a price that sounded generous, smiled faintly, and slid a contract across the table as if it weighed nothing at all. I had no other choice. In the end, I signed. A few days later, on a clear afternoon, someone sent me a video clip. When I opened it, I froze. The setting was familiar, the same private room, the same faces from the past, but this time, the man sitting at the center was Thomas. A voice in the background asked, "Come on, Thomas, admit it. You had your eyes on Ethan's company for a long time, didn't you? And that whole thing with Lily, wasn't that your setup too?" Thomas lit a cigarette calmly, his tone casual. "Cheating isn't something you can force on anyone," he said evenly. "Do you think I could have pushed Ethan onto someone's bed?" The group burst into laughter. "Come on, don't kid yourself," another man teased. "We all know you did it out of spite for Emma Taylor. You were jealous because your goddess got betrayed, so you wanted payback. Admit it." The room erupted in jeers and whistles. "No way," someone else laughed. "Wait, you mean Thomas had a thing for Emma too?" Thomas's voice hardened. "That was more than 10 years ago, Phil. Drop it." His words were clipped, his tone defensive. "What I did was just business." But the others repeated his words mockingly. "Business, huh? What kind of business involves planting a driver to spy on Ethan and feeding intel to Emma? And that snowy night, didn't you personally send someone to call Lily so she'd see it all with her own eyes? Damn, that's ruthless." Someone whistled again. "They're not together anymore anyway. If you still like her, why not go after her now?" Thomas went quiet. He crushed his cigarette in the ashtray and suddenly kicked the leg of the table hard enough to make everyone flinch. "You think I'm like Ethan, someone who abandons his wife and child?" he growled. Then his tone shifted, low and strange. "Some birds are born to fly. Lock them in a cage and they'll only wither away." "Huh? What bird? Speak clearly, man." "Shut up, idiot," another laughed. I get it, he's saying he liked her but didn't want to trap her. He wanted her to live free, proud the way she deserves. Thomas squinted, smirking faintly. What are you, a novelist? That's so cheesy it makes me sick. What do you think I am, some 18-year-old boy who just fell in love? He raised his glass. Forget it, drink. I sat silently in front of the screen, watching the familiar faces laugh and talk as if none of it mattered. Then, without warning, tears streamed down my face. There was no anger left, only emptiness. I couldn't blame anyone anymore. Every mistake was mine. I was the one who destroyed what I had built, the one who lost the woman who had given me her youth, her faith, and everything she had. I lowered my head and let out a quiet, broken laugh. Serves me right, I whispered. I deserve this. The sunlight outside burned gold and brilliant, but inside me there was only a cold, gray void. Amid all that brightness, I felt like a man lost in a desert, wandering endlessly without a way home. 6 years passed after that fall, that left me with nothing. And then, by sheer chance, I saw Emma again, inside the corridor of the city's central hospital. She looked even more radiant than I remembered. Her softly curled hair framed her face, her eyes were gentle, and her smile carried the warmth of spring. Beside her stood a little girl, delicate and lovely, like a porcelain doll. Her daughter's bright eyes sparkled as she pouted and babbled about something, her voice ringing through the hallway like the chiming of a silver bell. The encounter happened so suddenly that I froze in place. Her name, the name I had whispered to myself countless times in sleepless nights, escaped my lips before I could stop it. Emma. She turned around. For a brief moment, surprise flickered in her eyes, but her expression quickly steadied, calm and composed, as if this was nothing more than an ordinary meeting between acquaintances. What a coincidence, she said with a polite smile. You two brought your son in for a checkup too? As always, my little boy shrank back into my mother's arms, burying his face in her shoulder, refusing to look at anyone. In contrast, the little girl beside Emma was lively and talkative, her voice full of curiosity. "Mummy, what's wrong with that boy?" she asked, gazing at my son with innocent concern. My chest tightened. A strange ache rose in my throat and I struggled to steady my voice. "Is she your daughter?" Emma smiled softly. "Yes, I brought her back to visit for a few days. There's an architecture forum being held here this week, and it happens to coincide with our professor's birthday. I thought it'd be a good chance to come home for a bit. She caught a little cold. The weather here's too different." My mother suddenly spoke up, her tone awkward and hesitant. "So, she's adopted then?" Emma gently shook her head, her voice composed, carrying no hint of discomfort. "No, I'm married now. She's my biological daughter." My mother's face stiffened for a second, before forcing out a brittle smile. "She's adorable, and so bright too." The little girl's eyes lit up. Clearly proud, she straightened her back and chirped, "That's because I'm mixed. Daddy says mixed kids are both pretty and smart. I don't need anyone to carry me. Unlike that boy, he still needs his grandma." Emma scolded her lightly. "That's enough, sweetie. Don't say such things. He's sick." Her words were a reprimand, but her tone overflowed with warmth and tenderness. Then her gaze shifted toward my mother and me. "Where's his mom?" she asked gently. My throat went dry. I couldn't speak. My mother answered in a trembling voice. "Lily passed away during childbirth. Severe hemorrhage. They couldn't save her." Emma's face went still for a brief moment. Then she simply said, in her calm, polite tone, "I'm sorry for your loss." After a few more courteous words, she took her daughter's hand and left. It was a long time before I learned the rest. After leaving me, Emma had pursued the dream she'd once given up, becoming an architect, just as she had planned back in college. She married a foreign colleague, and 2 years later, their daughter was born. When we left the hospital that day, my mother suddenly broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, as though all the guilt and regret she had carried for years were finally too heavy to bear. "It's all sin, all of it," she cried. My chest tightened painfully, as if someone had crushed it in their fist. The little boy in my arms sat motionless, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. No emotion, no reaction. He had been diagnosed with autism when he was 2, a condition that sealed his emotional world away from everyone. I closed my eyes, my hands trembling as I clenched them tight. This was the price I had to pay. The radiant gem I once possessed, the woman I had taken for granted, had gone on to shine brighter than ever after leaving me. And I finally understood. Those who betray a pure, devoted heart deserve to swallow every last thorn of their own making. If it were you, would you walk away from a love that keeps breaking you? Love and Lies story.